Good evening, welcome. Let's stand for the pledge and please remain standing for the invocation. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Pastor Clayton Wilfer from Joy Fellowship. Welcome.
Thank you. Let's pray. Gracious God and Heavenly Father, from your word and your word alone, the universe came into existence. From you comes all creation. By your majesty and power comes the very breath we breathe. From you comes all truth, righteousness, grace, and mercy. We thank you for all the gifts you have bestowed upon us. As the council begins their meeting tonight, we ask that you would guide these leaders. Give them your wisdom, your grace, your peace, and insight as they go about the task of leading the town of Fountain Hills. We ask this trusting in your divine will. Through Jesus Christ, your Son, our Lord, we pray. Amen.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Mayor Dickey.
Here.
Vice Mayor Tolas.
Here.
Councilmember Charno.
Here.
Councilmember Brown.
Here.
Councilmember Magazine.
Here.
Councilmember LaCrone.
Here.
Councilmember Spellich.
Here.
Thank you. I wanted to mention that at the request of the town manager and myself, we are pulling item 8E off for more information to come up on another time and probably talk about it during one of our budget meetings. And in addition, there was apparently a notification that there was going to be a Hemingway hearing possibly tonight, and that won't be tonight. That will be likely in June. So if you're here for that, that was misinformation. So, okay. Reports by mayor, council members, and town manager. Did anybody have anything that they did over the last couple of weeks they want to talk about? No, I know Mike was at something, and I'm going to bring him up, and I know David was at something, so I'm going to bring him up too. I first wanted to mention, though, that for those of us who've lived here for quite a while, St. Patrick's Day probably reminds you of Keith McMahon, who was our former colleague up here, and believe it or not, Dennis, it's been 10 years since he passed away, March 17, 2009. I have a quote here that was from a friend that would sum it up really well. Council member McMahon had a passion for Fountain Hills and a love of helping the town. He served the community well. I'll always remember his kind spirit and great smile. So even after 10 years, he always called us the Russo girls. So the Russo girls in our entire community miss Keith a lot. There have been a lot of activities over the last couple of weeks. Had an East Valley's mayor meeting in Paradise Valley. We had our beautiful kite festival. Taco Mayor Oscar Gomez was here. We did a proclamation right out there in the hallway, and Vice Mayor was there, and Councilman Charno was there. We had a dedication to honor Jane Haynes, who the Times referred to as the Queen of the Botanical Gardens, and that was a wonderful honor for her. I met with Flagstaff Mayor Coral Evans as she was in the valley and talking about short-term rental, which is something we kind of have in common. We had a Sister Cities fundraiser with Mayors Kavanaugh and Morgan there that featured food from every country there. And if that wasn't fun enough, my official activities wrapped up with Councilman Spellich. And I'm going to make you talk about it. You came and spoke at the Sunset Kiwanis with me, so.
Yes, Madam Mayor. The mayor and myself spoke at the Kiwanis dinner, in which they invited us and gave us a beautiful Chinese buffet, and enjoyed it. We talked a lot of substantive issues, ranging from the sheriff's department to town infrastructure problems, streets, revenue, and it was a really good meeting. A lot of questions and answers. I think we were questions and answers for over an hour.
Yeah.
So that was very good. And just while I have the floor, I wanted to personally thank Rachel Goodwin and her staff who put on, I don't have an Irish drop of blood in me, but I showed up and thanked all the volunteers, and I want to tell you what an unbelievable turnout and what a great event you put on. So I want to thank you very much for that. It really showcased the town. I can't believe, social media-wise, I had a lot of friends in Chicago texting me pictures of the fountain like I didn't see it. But they're like, hey, your fountain turned green. I'm like, I'm standing right next to it. So anyways, but it was great. So thank you very much for a great job.
Thank you, Councilman. It's kind of like us sending pictures of snow to them. It's like, thank you for that. Councilman Charno is going to be attending, and then we look forward to hearing a transportation conference that's going to have to do with aging and transportation. So we look forward to that. It's very relevant to some members. Would you like to say something?
No, I guess because I'm aging, maybe they picked me to go. I'm not sure, but no, yeah, I'm looking forward to that. That's later this month, and then on Thursday I have a Valley Metro board meeting as well, so I can report on that at a later meeting. And it's good to remember Keith. I mean, I worked with him real closely at the paper when he was with the developer. He'd bring in press releases and that. And one thing that always stands out was his laugh. He always had a great laugh besides his smile. So yeah. And then it was good to see Mayor Oscar from Ataco, El Salvador here and meet with him in person again. I've been to Ataco twice, and one of our 4 sister cities, of course, and Mayor Dickey had a proclamation. We had a nice reception out in the lobby out there, and then we had a nice dinner afterward at Anala over there at the Fort McDowell Resort. So it was a good evening, good to see him, and Sister Cities Commission and Sister Cities Committee were represented, and you know, he was presented some checks and stuff to help the students in Ataco, so it's always good to help where we can.
Thank you. Next is the public appearance by our captain, Larry Kratzer of MCSO. Thank you. As you know, we've started to have this as a regular part of our meetings once a month, and we're happy to have you.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, council members, Vice Mayor Toles. So this is our monthly update from MCSO. One of the things that we've been focusing on with MCSO in the town over the last month, or over the last 2 months, but mostly over the last month, is really increasing visibility and traffic enforcement in the town, and that's due to the high number of accidents and pedestrian-related incidents that we've had. So MCSO is, residents may see a lot higher visibility of patrol vehicles running radar along Saguaro and some of these other high-volume areas. You'll see an increase in traffic stops in those areas. If residents have any locations that they would like to see added enforcement, we encourage them to reach out to us. That's how a lot of our traffic enforcement's driven, in addition to analyzing traffic crash data. Recently, with the school being back in, high school age student drivers over off Bainbridge, we had a couple of complaints of traffic speed related activity in that area. So we've conducted some additional enforcement in that area as well. In the month of March alone, deputies have already issued either warnings or citations, over 100 of those for speed related or stop sign or red light related violations. And so that's where our focus is really on speed-related enforcement and traffic, the stop sign violations and red light violations. Looking at the traffic stop data, a lot of our accidents are part of the contributing factor is speed. The biggest contributing factor is inattentiveness, so there's not much we can do about that other than issue violations for lane changes that are unsafe and driving nature of that sort. MCSO held their Coffee with the Cop. It was our first one of this year. We held it on Saturday, March 9th. We were able to partner with the Maricopa County Attorney's Office. They had 3 representatives who came out and set up a table. They talked with residents just as the deputies did from the district here. We set up a child ID fingerprinting booth, and we had good conversation with a lot of residents from the town. We had a good turnout. It was we held it for 2 hours, and we had a lot of people come and go. Really good turnout, a lot of good conversation. One of the things that we talked last time about was working with the Fountain Hills Times and trying to make sure that we are addressing some of the concerns or issues or questions from the community. One of the things that I've started doing was meeting with Bob Burns from the Fountain Hills Times on a weekly basis. So we're meeting usually every Thursday, and we talk about incidents or things in the town that residents may be interested in or current events. And Bob's able to ask questions, and we're able to give him what information we're able to give him. And we're working with Bob. We're looking at potential public service announcements or also putting in there, looking at some options for putting in there some traffic stop data information. We've had some residents who said that they don't believe there's any traffic stops being conducted. When I talked to Bob Burns about that, I think maybe some of the misconception was he used to put that in the paper. It's no longer in there, so if someone's relying on that alone, I know visibility is a big part of that, but if they're relying on that alone, that information is no longer in there. So we're looking at methods to put some of that information back in there to help people understand what's going on. And again, if residents have any concerns, issues, or areas that they'd like to see added enforcement, we really encourage them to reach out to us so we can put resources in those areas. That's all I have for my update, unless there's any questions from any of the members of the council.
Councilman Spellich?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, if I publicly criticize you, I'm going to also publicly acknowledge that 2 mornings I reached out to Manager Miller, Grady Miller, and because I didn't have your cell phone number, and you probably didn't want me to call you because it was 5:15 in the morning. But both 2 times this week, 5:15 in the morning, squad cars taking radar. Folks, by the way, you might think that there's nobody traveling at 5:15 in the morning, but believe me when I tell you, there's people traveling at 5:15 in the morning down Swirl. It's like the Indianapolis 500. 2 squad cars on Swirl and 1 on Shea, and highly visible. And I have just noticed, seriously, just the last couple of days, leaving in the morning, people are actually doing the speed limit. So I want to thank you and your men for listening to it and responding to it.
I'll pass that along. Thank you, Councilman.
I gave the captain a little forewarning when I said I had a question for him, and you've anticipated me because what I wanted to talk about was traffic enforcement. First of all, how much is a ticket? How much do people have to pay for a ticket?
It depends on the speed that they're going over. If it's a speed related, it depends on that. I mean, there's other options, of course, for traffic school that they can take where they don't pay a fine to the court for that violation, but they would pay a fee for the traffic school. So those fines range across the board. I would say on average it's probably close to $200, but that can lower a little bit or raise a little bit based on speed or what that violation is.
And when do the police decide whether or not to give a warning or a ticket?
There's a lot of discretion in that area. The deputies have that discretion. They can determine when they do write that citation or when they issue a warning. That's something that command staff, I don't push that down to the deputies. Most law enforcement officers have that discretion. Some of the things that go into consideration, though, with that is how egregious the speed is, maybe what type of environments around there. Is there a lot of pedestrian traffic in that area? Have we had a lot of accidents in that area? And just to bring that up, one of the deputies I spoke to recently, I've only been here for a little over 3 months, but he's a deputy who does a lot of traffic enforcement, and he talked about a time where he himself dealt with a lot of accidents at Shea and Palisades, and it was in regards to folks making a right turn on red. And he was aware of several rollover accidents in that area because of the right turn on red. So he started hitting that area hard for the next few months and writing a lot of citations, and that helped curb that type of behavior. There was no accidents in that area for quite a while. So those are the scenarios where a deputy may decide he's not going to have discretion. He's going to remove that discretion, just issue a citation for violations like that. But again, it's the deputy's discretion.
How many deputies do you have at any one time out on the road who might react to speeders?
Well, at any one given time, we have 3 to 4 deputies on the road. Calls for service take precedence, and any downtime that they have in between that, they're able to conduct traffic enforcement. So deputies that can actually dedicate time to. It depends on the time of day. I'd like to think that we always have one, at least, that can put some time towards traffic enforcement, but I've seen times where the calls for service are holding and they're stacked up, and we've got to get to those, so there's no time for traffic enforcement. So it depends on the day of the week and the time of day.
You've got a tough job when you've got 3 or 4, and some of them are off with other kinds of incidents. I'm rarely up at 5:15 in the morning, but I'll tell you my experience, and the experience of a lot of our constituents, is that it's out of control. It's just out of control. People think 35, the numbers are reversed in 53. I mean, I see people speeding all over the place. I can be on Shea going 55 miles an hour. People go by me like I'm standing still. And are the officers sitting in their cars in certain places, or are they driving around looking, or?
It's a combination of both. We have radars in our vehicles that can be used while they're in motion and that can be used while they're at a standstill spot. One of the things that we're looking at implementing is the use of undercover police cars. That's one of the deputies' hardest thing is, when they're driving down Saguaro, cars aren't passing them going 50 miles an hour because it's a marked unit and they know they're going to get stopped. But if it's an unmarked unit or a car that's not easily identifiable as a police car, you're not getting that behavior change based on them identifying it. So we're looking at a couple of options. We have a GOA, Governor of Highway Safety grant vehicle. It's utilized by our Lake Patrol Division, but it's an undercover car for aggressive driving grant funding work that the GOHS reimburses us on. So we're working with our Lake Patrol Division to get that vehicle out here and allow our personnel to use that where it wouldn't accrue any cost to the town for overtime. It would be grant funded, reimbursed by the Governor of Highway Safety. And then we have detectives who have vehicles that aren't fully marked MCSO patrol cars. And those are other options that we're looking at is utilizing those vehicles for that traffic enforcement.
Finally, I have a suggestion, and that is that to suspend warnings for a period of 3 months and slap a ticket on these people. They pay $200 or go to class. They're going to think twice. You give them a warning, especially the younger ones, and they're just off and running again. So I think that's something you might want to consider.
I'll note that and I'll set it out.
Yeah, I'll bet you will.
Anyone else? Thank you very much. Appreciate this. Next is the call to the public. Do we have any speaker cards?
We do. The first one is Doug Harris.
Thank you, Mayor
Hi.
and the council. I am Doug Harris. My official title is District Governor for the Lions Club in the state of Arizona. I was elected by the president of Lions Club International. I worked my way up from being a person picking up trash on the side of the road to being in charge of what I am now, which is a portion of the state of Arizona. It is our desire of Lions Club International in Oak Brook, Illinois, to establish and reestablish a Lions Club in this town of Fountain Hills. In 1989, we had a club chartered. We had about 45 people in the club back in those days. The club lasted 20 years, and basically they all died. So the club folded in 2009, and in the last 10 years, I worked my way up through the ranks, and I am now retired myself, and I would like to have you to give me a stamp of approval for us to put a Lions Club back in your town. Why? Number one, our main focus is vision. We do eye screenings for children from 6 months of age all the way up to age 18. We do about 500,000 children in the state of Arizona alone. One screener costs $7,000. The clubs are able to get these screeners by having 501c3 clubs, and we're able to do a job to the point that the state Senate, House of Representatives, have a bill right now working its way through the state that the Lions Clubs will be responsible for every child being screened in the state of Arizona. So I ask your permission to be able to place a Lions Club in your town. Any questions?
I don't think we can actually respond because it's a call to the public, but we really appreciate you coming, and I'm sure you will be hearing from us, or we'll be hearing from you, and we're very glad that you're here.
Well, I have with me information brochures and also membership brochures, just in case you want to know.
Of course.
I would be amiss if I did not have a series of membership. I can leave this on the table in the brochure if you would like.
Yes.
But as far as response to I live in Hebrew Overguard. Anybody knows what that is? I think the temperature this morning was 25 degrees. I retired there, but I also have residence in Mesa, Arizona. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. We'll take those, yeah, for sure. Next, please.
Bob Shellstrom.
Good evening, I'm Bob Shellstrom from Fountain Hills, and I want to start out by wishing our mayor a happy St. Joseph's Day. For those of you who don't know, that's the Italian version of St. Patrick's Day. Anyway, what I'd like to speak about first is I've been doing some digging into the project that's going to supposedly result into the restrooms over at the lake. One of the things, there was a lot of claims made for the reason this was originated. And some said there was a structural failure in those ASR wells. Some said there were safety issues for electrical and flooding issues. So I started looking into it. Having done many of these assessments before professionally, there's always an assessment report from which you flow to whether you repair or you replace. It says things, if you got a structural problem, what is that problem, how severe is it? If you have code violations that are safety considerations, that's included in there. So I filed a public records request to see this report. What did I find out? There never was one. There wasn't any basis that they could find documented that backs up the reason this whole project started. They did have an electrical study. It's called a arc flash study. And what that does is to see if there's electrical issues that may be a safety hazard. I took a look, and they did evaluate in 2013 these ASR wells. They found no problems with code, they were just missing a fuse. That was the only problem they found after an extensive code review in 2013. Currently, the sanitary district is involved with a guaranteed maximum pricing contract with Hunter Construction. They're the ones who came up with the latest estimate of $3.714 million for this project. They may negotiate it down some, but it's been my experience, and I'm sure Mr. Brown's too, that when you get in these negotiations, if you can get 10 or 15% off of that, you're probably doing pretty good. So it's still going to be very substantial. Now, what's becoming clear is what was driving this whole project was the restrooms. They couldn't come up with a reason to say they needed something above ground. When I asked this, said, well, why did you need that above ground? They said, because we wanted it. That's a politician answer, not an engineering answer, and I expected better from them. Anyway, since the driver is really the restrooms that are really outside of the sanitary district scope and in the purview of the council and getting their permission, I think you need to look very closely at this, because the bottom line is they can't afford it. One of the questions I asked was, I said, where are you going to get $3.7 million? I looked at their budget, and they have a $140,000 budget for this year, and a maximum of $2 million over, I think, 4 years. So I asked where the money's coming from. They said, that's still under discussion. I mean, everything you take a look at in a project for smooth sailing is looking to be a real problem here. Now, the question is whether the board is willing to give up on some of these things that may be useful to be able to get this in line. Hope to hear from you, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Bob. Next, we have our consent agenda. Do we have a motion for approval, or if anybody wants to take anything off?
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Next is the first item on the regular agenda, which is consideration of adopting Resolution 2019-22, amending the McDowell Mountain Preservation Commission bylaws. Grady, please.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Mayor and Council, you recall at the retreat, we had some discussion regarding housekeeping items related to the council rules of procedure. We also discussed these particular items that are before you, both 8A and 8B, 2 council meetings ago. This particular agenda item basically is amending the McDowell Mountain Preservation Commission bylaws. Our town clerk has specifics as to what is included in it. But you recall, this is, I believe, to add the 8th seat to this board.
Yes, it adds the 8th seat and also the 2 emeritus positions.
Any more discussion on this item? Does somebody want to make a motion, please?
I'll go ahead and move approval for Resolution 2019-22 to amend the McDowell Mountain Preservation Commission bylaws.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. The next item is related. So this would be the appointment of the additional member of McDowell Mountain Preservation Commission and a possible designation of up to 2 emeritus, members. Trying to get the language right.
It's either emerita or emeriti. I don't know my Latin that well.
Well, I'm just going to say both of their names and the way it's written right here. So I move to appoint Dr. Darian Slater to the McDowell Mountain Preservation Commission and designate Bill Myers and Bill Craig as emeritus members.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye. Aye. We thank them for their service. Speaking of commissions, we have next is approving the SPAC recommended reprioritization of the 2017 strategic plan. We spoke about this at the retreat. Grady?
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor and Council, you recall at the council retreat, I believe we spent a considerable amount of time going over the objectives and the specific tasks that are in the strategic plan. The Strategic Planning Advisory Commission spent quite a bit of time going through what I would call a reprioritization process. Specifically, the goals and objectives and the tasks are still all the same. They felt that they were all very still important and relevant. But what they did was they came through and color-coded, and it's in your packet and it's in the packet for the public to see if they wish to look at it. They came up with color codings for highest, high, and medium. And basically, nothing else changed. It's still in the same order in terms of the way it was written in the original plan. All those items are still in the same order. It's just that when you look at them based on the reprioritization, they are color-coded. The commission went through and did this individually based on the fiscal realities of the town and what the ability of the town to pay for some of the items that were listed. So they went through and did that individually, and then they discussed it, and then they acted on it. And then that's, of course, what you saw when you had your retreat. We have 5 members here tonight from the Strategic Planning Advisory Commission. I know the chair was possibly interested in speaking on this, but Council, since they did spend 2.5 hours on this particular item, I would recommend approval as is. Just to let you know, in addition to that, there's going to be a visioning process that will be taking place this summer that will be really the impetus for the next complete rewrite to this. So this will not be incrementally updated next year, but the Strategic Planning Advisory Commission is scheduled to do a complete major update to this in 2020. And so the plan is to do this visioning process, which the Fountain Hills Civic and Cultural Association is leading, which is, I believe they've titled it Vision 2.0, which is slightly different than what was done 3 years ago. But it's going to be very similar. It's going to involve the community. There will be surveys as well. So the community will be able to be involved at some level in this next process. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions from council? Is there a speaker card? Oh, there is, okay.
Yes, from Bob Shellstrom.
Hello, I'm Bob Shellstrom from Fountain Hills, and I attended the last Strategic Planning Committee meeting when they had proposed this information. And I was really surprised to find out something. I thought there had been well-developed justification for these, something documented in writing, and I was told, no. There was nothing that they had to back up the conclusions that are in here. For example, one of the comments here is to encourage increasing density of housing. So I said, I can think of a lot of negatives, I can't see the positives. What is your argument for doing so? Because this didn't originate with the community. That came from somebody in the political or public world here. They couldn't give anything. Now, Town Manager Grady has endorsed this. So I would hope that somebody on the board would ask for the justification from him, because he must have studied that in some detail. There are other issues. One thing that's strangely missing is nothing about getting more effective in spending. You've all been involved with government for a long time, and I have yet to find a government that couldn't do some substantial spending. Is it as much as we need to take care of the balance? I have no idea. But the bottom line is, there are ways you can do it and make sure you're optimal. And I can assure you from looking here, they are not. There's better you can do. So that's another question I will ask on somebody, and why that is not included here. We also talk about schools, which are a major asset to our community. Here it doesn't say, let's improve them. On March 1st, we just had the school report cards come out. And for our academic group in math, for all the as merit scores, we came in 8th of 8 in our group. In English, we came in 7th of 8. Now, it would seem if this was a data-driven document, what they would be saying is the major issue is improving the schools, not trying to just promote them as being something better. Found out something this week from somebody unofficially, was that we have 300 kids from Fountain Hills that are going to the nearest Scottsdale schools. Still verifying that, maybe some went further and there's others, and I'm looking more into the data. But that's not an issue with demographics. When you only have 1,368 students in your school and 300 are leaving for your neighboring schools, that's a problem. What's the reason for that exodus? We don't know. Vision Fountain Hills and the committee didn't look into it. That's something that should. It's important to these goals since education was missed. I mean, I could go on for much more than my 3 minutes on these issues. But the point here is you've got to ask some questions to validate this thing, unless you want to be a rubber stamp, which I think you're all too good and qualified people to do. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any comments?
I have a question.
Okay,
I
Councilman
have a question
Magazine?
of whoever's representing SPAC.
Excuse me?
I have a question of-
Somebody from SPAC, would you come forward and be prepared to answer anything? I wanted to mention the members because we appreciate your work. I know Gerard Bishalia and Peter Bordeaux, Dana Sarr, John Kraft, Jerry Friedel, Cynthia Magazine, and John McHugh. And you're coming up. Thank you.
John Kraft, representing SPAC.
Hi, John. I probably misread this. I'll say that right up front.
All right.
But when I looked at it, I thought financial stability was the third goal, not the first. Is that correct?
Not having that in front of me, I'm not in a position to answer that at this particular point.
Could you check that out, please?
I could absolutely check it out for you.
As far as I'm concerned, I suspect my colleagues might agree with this. That's our number one goal.
Stability and sustainability is.
They reprioritize it as the highest priority.
These are their top three right here.
Yeah,
Okay, I stand corrected.
Yeah.
very good. Anything else?
Anybody else have any questions? So I've been taking the little, this was the summary sheet, and then I took what you put as the priorities and circled them, and I've been taking them. David and I took it when we went to speak, and I've been to some other places, to kind of show that we still have these goals, but that you have revisited them. And we certainly spoke about them a lot at our retreat. I think the backup material, the way all of these were formulated, are a very large cooperative effort from the folks on the commission over the years, which started, 2006 maybe, when we first started all this? And then over the years, councils have changed and looked at it and approved it, which is what we're doing now, and obviously you're looking at doing some updates. But we very much appreciate the priorities and the difficulty in the realization that how much revenue has to do with the other things that we'd like to do for our town. And I hope that as we go forward with our discussions, that you'll be there to help and guide us as we talk about possible not only revenue options, but expenditures that we can look at. And I, for one, appreciate it. And if you're all ready, oh, yes, sir.
One more, I'm sorry. I really hesitate to raise, to raise this, but on the issue of density that was raised, was that to conclude that we need more multifamily or overall density?
The general discussion really centered around our demographic mix. And with the vision that this town had when it first incorporated, with the schools being an integral part of that, you need a pretty good demographic mix in order to support schools, in order to support businesses, et cetera. And that begins with housing. And the term, I think, has been misconstrued, affordable, but we're looking in this particular plan to recommend that the town consider where it's appropriate development of homes that are more consistent with and appropriate for families with children, young children.
Thank you.
Yes, Councilman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think, I know we're not supposed to comment on public things, but I have a problem with criticizing the schools and using the criticism to say that 300 children who are in Fountain Hills don't attend school here in Fountain Hills, and kind of imply that the reason that they don't is because of the poor quality of education. I personally have 3 friends here in town who have children, so they would be 3 of the 300 that attend not Fountain Hills, but because the family wants them to have a Catholic education. So if you choose to send your child to a Catholic school or a private institution, you shouldn't automatically assume that the reason that they don't attend school here is because of a poor education. I think that's an insult to the school, an insult to the teachers, and just an insult general.
Councilman?
I certainly understand what the councilman is saying, but of the children that leave to go somewhere else, I have no idea how many of them are going to Catholic schools, but I'm guessing it's not a large number. The other thing is that my understanding from talking to the principal some time back was that we're gaining almost as many students each year as we're losing. And I think it's critical that people understand that.
Gets back to demographic mix.
Yes, Councilman.
Mayor, thank you.
Vice Mayor.
Thank you, that's okay. I had the opportunity to spend the whole day with one of the leaders of the school district here and had some insight as to some of the challenges they are having. It has a lot to do with the demographics. It has a lot to do with the misconceptions of the education and quality of education in this town. I, for one, can vouch for all of my children have gone through. 2 of them are out, 4 of them are still currently in, and we have an excellent school district here. However, we do need to be very, very concerned about the future of this community and the aging demographics here. So I think you're right on target in regards to the issues. I also do not feel that, and I think the comments by Councilman was that the perception is, or what Bob was indicating previously was that we are ranking low in our test scores and things of that nature. If that is the case, that's the case. And there's nothing wrong with wanting to be exceptional. So I think the district has that goal in mind, and I think we're all in line with wanting to have a balance in this community. So I think this is right on target.
Actually, it's good that we're having this conversation because the whole issue about the school district beyond the demographic mix came up in our initial planning 3 years ago, where we recognized that we needed to have the town more involved with and interacting with the school district, their board, their leadership, their supervisor. And that has begun. It's been, in fact, we've had several meetings. We hosted, the Vision Group hosted a meeting between the two organizations 2 years ago to begin some really strong dialogue. And I think that's already been reflected in how the schools are performing.
Councilman?
Thank you, Mayor. I think it also needs to be pointed out, this thing wasn't created in a vacuum, and it's been around for several years, and a lot of it was adopted following the visioning process that was held several years ago with 2,000 people responding to a survey and a day-long town hall setting, that type of thing. So these are goals, objectives, tasks, that kind of thing. I mean, you don't need reams of data and statistics behind goals. These are things we want to achieve, and this is what the community told us they want to achieve. So that's what we're going on.
Councilman? Vice Mayor?
Thank you. One follow-up comment, and I think this is important. It's nice to have the goal, a strategic objective and task in regards to the state trust land. But I have said many, many times before, if we don't focus on this downtown and focus on the commercial growth and we have the amenities that are going to be what families desire, no developer is going to come forth and put together a plan to put 1,600 homes on a state trust land when it takes a half an hour to drive to Shea and another half an hour, 45 minutes to get to any major area of the work population. So I think we've got a real challenge with that state trust land. One recommendation I'd have moving forward is we focus on what we know we have and focus on what our community, and your number one is branding and understanding what this community really is. And once we determine that, if we ultimately become the absolute the best retirement community in all of Arizona, amen for that. Then let's be that. But we've got to figure out where we're going and what we're going to do, and we can't try to create something that's not there. I think we're going to put a square into a round hole, and it's not going to happen. We're just going to continue. It's Groundhog Day in Fountain Hills, Arizona. We've been talking about this for 15 years.
Anybody else? A couple things, of course. The idea of the schools obviously are a draw for younger families. And I know that some of the items that our speakers spoke about has been answered. We talked about it at the retreat. The statistically, the kids that are going to different schools or online or homeschool or fill in the blank is very comparable to the rest of the country. I also know that one of the school board members has laid out many, many reasons why these things happen in and out, in addition to perhaps the cost factor of homes. But again, I'm very supportive that defining our strategic plan to include local schools and all of them, and making this town able to address and serve all of the ages is the task that went forward to you, and so far it's what we've heard. So as far as our status from our retreat and from what you all and from even Vision Fountain Hills is that the town values a multi-generational community, however that happens. And so we will continue to do that until, like you say, we may come to some different conclusions at a certain time, but I'm not ready to do that at this point. But I think that right now, the strategic plan that's before us, if it's okay with you, we can approve it as is, the reprioritization, and then we'll, of course, look forward to working with you closely as it develops. Is anybody ready to make a motion?
Is that a motion you just made?
Well, I
will second it.
Is that okay? I always forget. I can make a motion?
Yes,
Okay.
you can make it.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Thank you for coming. Next on the agenda is the item 8D, and rather than read it, I will ask Grady to introduce it, and then we'll...
Sure. Mayor and Council, we have a presentation on this item. The thing that we have quite a bit of struggle with each year is we are a very small organization. We don't really have a purchasing function within the town. This is kind of one of these areas that we have each of the department directors and their staffs work on purchasing. We find that every year we have challenges with trying to get contracts in place for a variety of different maintenance types of services. And so one of the things we found, we started working on this a couple years ago, which is this concept of job order contracting, which would help. It's a lot of work that we've had to do. It's taken us probably almost 2 years to get to this point where we are tonight. But as Rachel's going to point out, this is really, the light is at the end of the tunnel, and that this is really kind of the way to go in the future. All the cities around the valley and throughout the country kind of work off of job order contracting. With that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our Community Services Director, who really was the one who took the lead on this because of so many of the impacts that this will have on her department. Rachel?
Thank you, Grady. Mayor, Council, thank you for having me tonight. I'm going to apologize in advance. If you need me to speak up, please let me know. I'm a bit hoarse from our weekend in the park with wind and music and whatnot. But to that point, yes, this has been a long time coming for staff. This has been a lot of effort behind the scenes to get where we are this evening. And I am representing not only my department, but the rest of the town staff as well. This effort is not specific to community services, but is a town-wide element. I do have a quick presentation. I'm going to try to use it as a way to guide our talking points and hopefully answer some of your questions that you may have. But I do anticipate you will probably have additional, so let's dive in. So the job order contract. What is a JOC? What is a job order contract? It's a list of pre-vetted vendors that are on call for the town as needed. Essentially, they're pre-approved, meaning they've been reviewed legally, they have contracts in place, they have signatures on the dotted line, they have Grady's approval, they have all of their insurance requirements met, they have everything sort of lined up and ready to go. And the paperwork is all completed on the front end to save time when projects arise. It's a front-loaded process. We do all of the heavy lifting ahead of time so that when we're ready to actually implement projects, we can hit the go button. That's kind of how to think of it. It's also sort of an umbrella concept. That tends to be something I use to describe it. By having a variety of vendors, we ensure the availability and wide range of services. So you might have read on the item, there's, I believe, 15 contracts on this JOC this evening. And they are broken down by service level, specialty, size, and scope of what they can do. But it's essentially a list of vendors that we are trying to have ready to go so that when we can use them when we need them. That's what the JOC is. Where does the money come from? How are we going to pay for this? Well, JOCs aren't funded by new money or additional money. It's the same money we would spend when issues arise or maintenance concerns happen. It's why we have a budget. We've budgeted a certain amount of money in each line item for things like maintenance at our parks or maintenance on our roadways or maintenance of our sidewalks. This is money we were going to spend to maintain them kind of no matter what. We are just trying to put this in a function to make it faster for us to do that. So it's not new money, it's not additional money. Funding is already there. You might have noticed on the contracts, each vendor in the JOC is authorized for up to $125,000. That's a lot of money. That's a scary number when you start looking at it and go, each vendor can have that much? Well, no, that's not really what this implies. It's not to imply that there will be expenditures of this amount. It gives us the authorization that if we should need that, we can get there. By no means does it mean we will spend that much with each vendor. Our budget is what we can spend. This is just allowing us to have the contract in place. They're two different mechanisms. Keep in mind, too, that this is meant to service all departments within the town. So, for instance, if Community Services has an issue and we use $15,000 of this contract, and then Public Works has an issue and they use another $35,000 with that contract, we're at 50 right there. We've hit the $50,000 threshold with two projects unrelated to each other, but utilizing the vendor under the contract. So it adds up pretty quick when you start looking at multiple uses under multiple divisions and multiple departments. This also doesn't imply that we will spend the maximum with each vendor. It might be that vendor 1, 5, and 7 have worked with us and have met our need. We have specific needs for their services. Maybe it's paving, maybe it's concrete. And we have a lot of concrete work one year. We might use a lot with that specific vendor, but the other 13 vendors we may not have any jobs with for that year. It's not to imply that each vendor will spend $125,000 with each. And also, bottom line, if there's no funding, we don't do the project. Whether we might have $125,000 available on the contract, but if I don't have the money in my budget, I can't go do the project anyway. So it's not this is not authorization for more money or a budget allocation. This is just saying, yes, you can use these vendors to go do your work. We can't anticipate what job will come up, but some of the examples that you might consider are plumbing issues. When those issues come up, we need to address them. If we have playground damage, we need to address that. The Avenue of the Fountain pumps, an HVAC unit, storm damages, concrete damage, electrical work. These are all just sort of standard maintenance items that come up. Can't anticipate them necessarily, but when they happen, we need to get them addressed. So how does the JOC work? When we have a need arise, we have one of those examples that I just gave comes up. What will we do? Well, if we approve the vendor list this evening, the contracts tonight, we would contact one of the vendors from the list. We would request a quote or an estimate from them, no different than what we would standard do. Review the bid for the cost and the timeline and the availability. One of these mechanisms for this JOC that allows us is to say, vendor A, can you do this work? It needs to be done by the end of the week. Vendor A may come back and say, I already have a big job. I can't get to it till 2 weeks from Monday. That doesn't work for us. We can move to another vendor quickly and efficiently and get another quote. If the quote comes back higher than we have budgeted or more than we think is reasonable, we can move to another vendor. It doesn't preclude us from getting competition and things like that. Once we have that, we might seek potential follow-up from additional vendors if needed, if it doesn't meet our timelines or the availability or whatnot. And then we would seek approvals as needed based on our expenditure level. If the project comes back at $75,000, we still come to council for approval. We still go through our checks and balance system. If it comes back within our standard expenditure level or Grady's expenditure level, we still go through that process. It doesn't circumvent our procedures by any means. Once we have those approvals, then we would issue the PO and proceed with the work. What is not on this list is there's not a point where we have to go to legal for contract review. We are not waiting on insurance paperwork. We are not waiting for them to sign on the dotted line. All of that's already been done. So what are the risks? That was a question that came up, and it was a really valid question. What I was just saying, this process does not change our check and balance mechanisms within our procurement policies. It doesn't give us a green light no matter what we want to do, when we want to do it, go for it. It is a matter of just having an efficiency procedure. We still have the checks and balances of expenditures with you guys. Thresholds are still in place and requires council approval if over $50,000. That is the expenditure level that council authorized for our town manager. Anything over that comes to you for review. That would still be in place. This is not intended to replace the procedures for large projects or new initiatives. This is generally intended for maintenance and ongoing things. If we have a big new project that we want to take on, that still needs to come for review and still needs to come here for discussion and approval. It's not intended to take that place. Budget tracking requirements are also still in place. So i.e. we have our finance system, our software that tracks our balances for each of the vendors. It tracks our contracts. It makes sure that if for some reason we spend $125,001 with a vendor, it lets us know we can't do that. It won't approve the purchase order. It alerts us that there's a problem and we need to find a different vendor or we need to find a different solution. So it doesn't change any of those tracking things. All of those elements and those safeguards are still in place. What are the benefits? Staff efficiency is really one of the biggest, and that's really where we're coming from it. When a problem arises, we want to address it in days, not weeks. And by handling these contracts on a one-off basis, that's what it requires. We have to do a request for services, we have to send it to our legal team, it has to go through finance for vetting, we have to then get it back, we have to then get it back to the vendor for their signatures. It can take weeks. Aaron has a lot on his plate. We generally have at least a minimum 2-week window to allow for him to get to that paperwork. So right there, that's 2 weeks out of the gate before we do anything else. And staff wants to be able to address these problems. And then all the paperwork, again, I've kind of reiterated this, all the paperwork has already been done and the vendors have been approved. This is an efficiency process for us. It's also a cost savings for us. It saves staff time producing these individual contracts. We're not in there physically producing paperwork, getting the paperwork to where it needs to be, shuffling it from point A to point B to point C and D. It reduces the workload on our finance department to track each of the contracts independently. This is all kind of in a one lump effort so that they can save time as well. And it also reduces the workload and the billable hours from our legal. So all of those are cost-saving elements there. But lastly, there's a high community value here. This is something we want to address community issues quickly. There's nothing like having a basic issue. Hey, you have an irrigation leak out in your park. Yep, we know, we're trying to get it fixed. There's nothing like having that report come to you on a day-to-day basis by someone that walks our park every day and say, yes, I know we're working on it. Yes, I know we're working on it. And it takes 4 to 6 weeks, not because we don't want to address it, but because we have to go through the steps in order to procure the vendor to do the work. We want to show our community responsiveness to these types of issues, to these types of maintenance things. And we want, in turn, that builds trust and reliability with our community. And I think that that's what we're all after. We want our community to know, hey, you have an irrigation leak. Great. Next day, they see someone out there working on it. They know that there's a responsiveness and a trustworthiness about what we're doing and how we're maintaining our facilities, our parks, our programs, all of those things. So, who supports this? Lots of us. I have worked closely with Craig and the finance department to get to where we are this evening. I've worked closely with Aaron as well as our previous attorneys to get the ball rolling, progress, and then hopefully where we are today. Our town manager, Grady, has been involved in this process as well, our public works department, the community services department. Essentially, we've come together as a staff unit to say this is what makes the most sense for us to get our jobs done. Does anyone else do this? Yes, it is very common. It's not groundbreaking. It is not a new fangled approach to contracting. The state does it. ADOT does it. The city of Mesa, the city of Phoenix, city of Scottsdale does it. That's just to kind of start rattling off a few. It is not a new concept. I was actually on a interview panel yesterday for the city of Avondale for one of their open positions, and I had a chance to talk with their public works director. And because it was a procurement position, job order contracting came up as a discussion item. And I asked how it worked for them. Did they like that process? And their public works director let me know that they completed about 12 jobs under the job order contract just for their department this year. That's not for the entire city of Avondale, just for public works. Over the course of 5 years, that's 60 jobs that they were able to expedite quickly and efficiently. I think that's telling. So, all of the vendors listed in front of you, how did we get them? We went through all the hoops. We issued the RFP? We issued something. We issued the official document. It was posted. It went through 30 days posting. We received all of the bids back. We scored them. We had a team of 3 that scored them. We accepted all of the vendors that met the minimum qualifications. As long as they met those, and were scored properly, and we were able to accept them, which is, I believe it's 15 that's in front of you. And the variety of vendor includes large-scale vendors that do statewide projects. They work for the state. They do ADOT efforts. They do things north, south, east, and west. And then we also have local vendors that are just, mom-and-pop shops here in Fountain Hills, too. So we have a large variety of scale in terms of our vendors. This is my last slide. This is just some example scenarios of what we might need help with, and I've kind of used a lot of these as we've been talking. Sidewalk repair in the park, irrigation leaks, post-monsoon cleanups. We know we have storms. Cleanup happens. We're going to need help. Damaged or leaking window in the community center. All of these need to address, but they're not necessarily considered emergencies. At this point, when we've had these issues and we don't have a contract in place, we've looked to the emergency status to get us through. When we have monsoon cleanup, it has to happen. It can't wait 6 weeks. So we've declared, hey, we're going to go ahead and issue this as an emergency status. We need to get this fixed. We can't wait. But that's not really the point of the emergency clause. And so we're trying to put in a better mechanism to address these things that are expected, that they are routine, but they are not emergencies. I hope this addresses some questions, but I'm willing to answer any question you might have.
Thank you. Councilwoman.
Thank you, Mayor. Great job, Rachel. I can tell that you guys and whoever you worked with put a lot of work into this. I like to see systems that are efficient as well as effective. That's what this appears to be. You answered all the questions that I had except maybe one.
Okay.
And you mentioned that there was some pre-vetting on contracts and so forth, probably with Aaron. So is that just a general contract that said we've contracted with that vendor for any type of a job? And then when we get a specific job, is there a new contract, or does it just bounce off the initial contract?
It's based off of the initial contract. So when this went out, we had a listing of probably 16, 18 different items that might, or job types that might come up that we would need, services we might need.
So it was a full scope.
Correct. It was the full scope. So that when a job comes up that's specific to concrete, there's vendors that have indicated in their bid that says, we specialize in concrete work, we can do this, this, and this, and this. So we know which vendors have indicated that that is their area of expertise and willingness, so that we know which ones can do the work. So when a job comes up, we would issue out and say, hey, we have this job, we need this work done by next Thursday. Vendor A that is specific to concrete, can you do this work? And they would come back with a quote for us and a price estimate on it. But the contract is already in place. It's based off the original contract, the original paperwork when they bid. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councilman Brown?
Thank you, Mayor. Is it safe to assume that everything up to $50,000 is still approved by the town manager?
At this point, that is his expenditure authority, correct?
That's correct. At what point does do you have the authority? Do you have the authority to sign any of the agreements?
None of the paperwork, if a bid comes back and it's $3,500, yes, that's within the purview of staff to say, yes, let's go ahead and move forward.
In other words, it is $3,500 and $50,000.
I don't remember what my threshold is, I'll be honest, I'd have to ask Craig.
We don't want you overspending that.
Exactly.
Thank you. Excellent job. Great presentation.
Vice Mayor?
Thank you. I would concur. A great presentation, and you did a very good job with all these. I would just question why it took 3 years to come to this conclusion. It seems to make a lot of sense. I've always advocated for local businesses being preferential to jobs in town. $125,000, while I know you indicated on your slide that's a lot, in the scope, I don't think it's all that much. So any of these companies, I would think that would be considered a pretty small job, okay? Of this list, do you know which ones are from Fountain Hills?
If I saw the list, I might be able to tell you.
I mean, TNT Construction is, I know that. Of the rest, you said that a significant number were from Fountain Hills.
Well, actually, more are not from Fountain Hills, but everybody in Fountain Hills had the same opportunity as people outside Fountain Hills to bid on these. We do have, I know, like when we have storm issues, Justin, what are the two firms that are on this that respond to monsoons? We have the local companies. What are?
Construction and Carroll Contracting.
That's right.
Okay.
So yes, we do have a number. I don't remember which ones are off the top of my head. I'm hoping you can. Okay.
And I guess it's a question you may not have the answer to, but I would like to know if this RFP went out to these companies and local companies did not respond, why would they not respond in their own community to have an opportunity to do business with the town of Fountain Hills? I just don't understand it.
You know, that was a question we had before we got started on this process, and I should probably thank Aaron for his help with that, because that was a concern for us too, that we often have a very cumbersome process, and that can turn off vendors, particularly if they're small scale, and they don't have someone that's dedicated to putting out bids as their primary role.
It's absolutely, that is the case on this, and any kind of bidding that you see. You'll hear about that from folks, and because a lot of these are mom and pops, and it's a lot of work to actually have to complete all the paperwork. Every community I've worked in, big and small, we find that the local, the smaller businesses do not always go ahead and respond to these, and it's because of the amount of effort that it takes just to get in a proposal. It's not that they don't want it, but they would rather have something that's a lot more simplified. Now, there are the abilities for our local vendors here, for us that may not be on this job order contract, if they're within like the 3,500 or under, we can certainly use them for the smaller types of things. You know, we have to still get kind of the quotes and make sure that everything is okay, but we have done that in a number of cases. So this is not the end all, but this is for the larger dollar items that we need help with, and it takes just too long to get an RFP out there for some of these.
And Aaron did work with us to simplify this process as much as possible to make it as attractive as possible for the smaller entities.
The other thing I've heard too from, as far as from the smaller businesses, sometimes it's the insurance requirements. That right there is a big turnoff, because they know what their costs are to participate, but once they factor in what our liability insurance requirements are, it all of a sudden changes that this is really probably not really worth their effort, because we're trying to protect the town and the taxpayers' interests here. And so that is something that we do, but it's not just us, it's all jurisdictions all do the same thing with their contracting.
We were quite pleased with the 15 or 17 vendors that we had apply. That was much higher than we anticipated. So,
I have a couple questions, then we'll see if we have any speaker cards. One is how did you come to the 125,000 across the board?
Craig.
So, seems really coincidental.
Yes, Craig's directive.
There is a state statute that limits job order contracts, vertical construction, to $250,000. The prior town attorney, Gus Rosenfeld, and I talked about it, felt that to present to council a contract for $250,000 was not realistic. So we arbitrarily put it in half and came up with $125,000.
Thank you. And when would this start? Would it be like a next fiscal year kind of thing, or?
It would become effective when the contracts are signed, effective tonight if council approves them.
Everything has been signed by the vendors. We're at this point, we're at the 1 yard line, so to speak, at this point. Everything on the terms of paperwork has been done. We have executed everything to make this
no pressure
turnkey as possible.
Mayor, if you can tell people how big the packet was that you just signed today, or
yeah.
you know that we were asking to sign, it's this tall because of these job order contracts.
Yeah. Well, you had me until you said Aaron was for it, but anyway. Yes, Councilman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I got an email this morning from a constituent who begged me not to vote for this because their interpretation was that we were basically approving you guys to spend $125,000. Would you please reiterate that that is not what we're voting for? And
correct. And I can certainly understand the concern, and staff recognizes that. So the answer is no. We are not authorizing expenditures. You're not giving me a check for $125,000 for each of these vendors to go spend. This is essentially just allowing us the opportunity to work with these vendors up to that number. Our budget is what we can spend. These numbers don't have any bearing on what we are actually dollar for dollar able to spend. The budget is the authority for spending, is the money we have.
thank you. Excellent, John.
Do we have any speaker cards?
Bob Shellstrom.
Thank you. I'm Bob Shellstrom from Fountain Hills. Just briefly, I was misquoted by Mr. Spellich. I didn't say 300 students total. I said 300 to Scottsdale. Overall, there's about 1,200 students who leave. 2,600 students here, 1,368 in the district. That being said, I haven't used the term JOC in other states where I've administered and actually performed services under these. Typically, they were called general services agreements in other places, but it's a similar concept. While managing these problems, I found two problems. One is you're only as good as your evaluation of the bid. For example, I had some people who were rather inexperienced submit bids to me for work for a contractor to do maintenance work on schools of $5,000, and I said, why is it $5,000? I said, the numbers don't seem to justify that. When we looked into it and we talked to the contractor, he said, well, yeah, really, maybe it's a $2,000 job. So if you've got a good gatekeeper who knows what the prices for these things should be, it can be successful. If you don't, it can turn into an overpriced disaster. So hopefully you will be taking precautions to ensure that's taken care of. The other thing I had a concern about is I took a look at the contract on place, and there's a quite complex process for selecting these contractors. And I believe there was a very large percentage that was subjective from an interview in other places. One thing you have to be careful of to ensure you're not getting abuse is that if a contractor from all the objective criteria should be at the top of the list, and all of a sudden they get kicked away because of a subjective decision, that may be a problem. And I was a little disappointed because I expected to see that scoring report given to you to ensure that the people who were selected were indeed the best ones to serve us. Right now, you don't know that. You know somebody did something. They came up with those numbers, those names that are in the contract. Were they the best ones? Were they the best ones objectively? Were they the best ones because somebody liked the shirt they were wearing that day? You don't know that. And I would think that as a responsible council, that is something you would want to know. And that document probably should have been in there. Perhaps she can give it to you. With those two reservations, the overall concept is a good one, but there also has to be the control at some level, I would assume, of the town manager, that projects being selected are prudent and appropriate. You can't just let division heads say, well, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, and then come back and they're saying, why on earth were you doing this, and why was that the best solution? There has to be some control, and hopefully in your process, you will be arranging for that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other comments? Can I get a motion, please? I'm sorry?
I was just going to say, I do have one response, if you'd like to have the information. I don't have the scoring sheets. He's correct. I believe we had 17 applications, or 17 submissions. We took 15 of the 17. The two that did not, again, they met minimum qualifications. The two that did not were one was late and one was incomplete. Those are the only two disqualifying factors.
Thank you.
Just so you have that info.
Thank you. Somebody was
No.
poised.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, I just wanted to note, I mean, there's 6 broad categories here: utility, storm cleanup, general, playground, paving and concrete, and facility. And each category has, a minimum of 2 contractors for each one. So I think that's good. And I have full faith and confidence in staff and their recommendations and their vetting process. So I personally don't need to see the score sheets, but I'd like to go ahead and move approval of CS 2019-006 for general construction services. Do I have to read all the rest, or? So move to approve the motion as written.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, Rachel. Thank you. Okay, next we have the discussion with possible direction amending or repealing the public art ordinance. Well, Grady, and then we'll have a presentation.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor and Council. This item was placed on the agenda. Some of the council members that requested it were wanting to have a review of the public art program and the ordinances specifically as it related to the fees. And so at this point, we're going to try to come back with some additional information. We realize we're kind of short on that at this point. I do know that the Public Art Committee is here tonight, and I think that they were prepared to speak on this particular topic. So perhaps the mayor wishes to recognize them.
Thank you. Yes, I would. And even if we don't take any action, we definitely want to hear from you because it's going to help us along the way. So Dory and Carol, if you'd like to speak, or just Dory, Wittrig, will you really? You're on your own.
Gosh, I was hoping. Hi, I'm Dory Wittrig. I'm a resident of Fountain Hills and the Public Art Committee co-chair. I was hoping there'd be a little bit more dialogue so I'd understand a little bit more about this. And I know that I think a lot of people are in that same position. But what I wanted to do this evening was maybe let you all in on discussions that we've been having with staff, Rachel and others, and a direction that the Public Art Committee feels we need to go. So I have some prepared remarks, if you'd give me a few moments, or maybe more than a few. So, you know, it's no secret that our community is very fortunate to have had such a very passionate group of concerned residents who believe that a public art collection would be just one more benefit that would help us to become known as the world's greatest hometown. The collection, with over 150 pieces, including sculptural art and two-dimensional or flat art, is located in prominent locations throughout the community and speaks to the commitment our community has to the cultural arts. The Fountain Hills collection is a reminder to thousands of people every day of the finer elements of life. It speaks to all ages, and it's thought-provoking, and it encourages viewers to think and to reflect. Our public art collection is a collaborative between the town of Fountain Hills and the FHCCA, or the Fountain Hills Cultural and Civic Association, also known these days as I Love Fountain Hills. Donated pieces are gifted to the town through a process defined in 2 documents. Those documents include the Fountain Hills Public Art Master Plan, dated November of 2003, and the Percent for Public Art program, dated January 2007. Once donated, the town then becomes the stewards of the collection, responsible for the maintenance and insurance. There's really no quantifiable measure as to the value the collection has brought to our enjoyment, our way of life, and to the value of our community. I'm a realtor. And every time I have a new prospective resident in front of me that's never visited our community, I put them in the car and I take them around town. I stop in front of Centennial Circle. I stop at other locations. I tell them about the public garden. I tell them about the public art collection. I tell them about the quality of residents in our community and the volunteerism and the attitude of people who want to make the community better and have donated the public art collection. I can tell you it has a profound impact on their impression of our community. In recent years, the Fountain Hills Public Art Collection has been stewarded by the likes of Jerry and Jackie Miles, Sandy Thompson, Jean Linzer, Don and Carol Cunningham, Roy Nickel, and many others who very fervently shepherded its growth without hardly any public funding and through the passionate contribution of thousands of local residents. They went out, they got the money, they saw that the art got installed. This dedicated group of individuals created and served the collection diligently for over 25 years. But, as we know, often is the case, those folks are tired and they deserve a break from their efforts. So in 2018, we had a new era of leadership begin with the Public Art Collection that included Carol, Jenny Willigrod, and myself, and a few others, joining the Public Art Committee. And as rookies to that effort, we knew we needed a little help. We set out with a fresh perspective, and we wanted first to understand what the role of the Public Art Committee really should be. After discussions with the town staff, the following are the 3 areas that we deemed to be most important. The first was to create more oversight by the town staff and council. Town staff told us that they wanted more upfront input as to the placement of the art, if not the art itself, but definitely the placement of the art. The second was to create maybe a more diverse public art committee, to create a more inclusive membership and participation on the Public Art Committee, encouraging local artists and art patrons to participate and just residents of the community. And the third was to create systems and procedures for public involvement, to refine the policies and the processes whereby the individuals who want to make future contributions to the public art collection would receive easy to understand guidelines and direction from the town and the committee, So this last step was really self-preservation for us. We became quickly to understand that the process in the past had been handled by a group of very talented, very dedicated people, and they were extremely effective at just getting it done. Got some money, buy some art. Find some art, find some money. Get it done. They had great systems and procedures, yet much of it was not documented for us, and we felt that we needed a documented system that we could also pass along to future individuals who would be involved in the Public Art Committee and its process. To be honest with you, I'm really here on a short-term basis, I hope, to help kind of organize this and get it going in maybe a different direction for the future, and then pull in some people who are more passionate about art than I am, and I'll go back to real estate. So the Fountain Hills, the FHCCA agreed to fund an amount that allowed us to hire a reputable public art consultant, Diane Kripe, to help formulate the systems and policies and then create the necessary forms suitable for community outreach. She brought the industry best practices to the effort, and that's very important, and that's what I want to chat with you about. This initial work was completed in January 2019 when we met with Rachel and presented a document that was sort of a supplement at that point, we thought, to our current documents. What we found during the process, though, is as our consultant worked to incorporate the dynamics of our current documents, is that those read more like ordinance, and they really weren't written with process and procedure in mind. They also lacked the industry best practices that Mrs. Kripe brought to us. So the following suggestions came out of that initial work. First would be a maintenance contribution. It's very common practice for municipalities to ask public art donors to contribute a percentage of the donated art for the future maintenance of it. Obviously, implementing this type of a guideline would help to make the public art collection more self-sustaining. The second area was that we wanted to improve the processes for the developers' percent for public art. The programs that encourage developers to contribute public art to the benefit of their community are growing in popularity throughout the country as an answer to the decline in the public funding of cultural arts. Here in Fountain Hills, there's been some confusion about the execution of these types of contributions, which we feel can be reduced through more clear and concise documentation and programming that we would develop through our work with Ms. Kripe. So, to wrap this up, we hope that the town council will allow us to guide the public art collection into a more sustainable and stable future. FHCCA and the Public Art Committee are looking forward to working with the town to update the guidelines and procedures so that the collection will be preserved, relevant for future generations. One thing we can all agree upon is that everyone has a different appreciation for art. And future generations should also be able to contribute their unique vision to the collection, and we feel now is the time to make the proper arrangements for them to do so. While the past few years of large acquisitions of art is probably over, there will continue to be worthy projects suggested, along with commemoration projects like the upcoming 50th anniversary of our community. There will be traveling art exhibits that will be made available that will allow us to reach out and touch the four corners of the earth. And the current collection will always require a guiding hand as it ages and requires maintenance and reparations. I'm not sure what the issues are that you are facing with the percent for public art. I can tell you that there are some amazing pieces around town that our community would be sorely lacking if we didn't have them. And having come from the development background, I understand maybe some of the sensitivities of those costs, but I hope that you continue to find a way that developers can not only contribute to our community, but contribute to their own project and help those to be more beautiful and make much more of a statement other than just the commercial buildings that they're putting up. So I thank you for your time. Any questions?
Thank you so much, Dory. Any questions? Yes, Councilman.
Thank you very much for your presentation. We had met at the Kiwanis Club and we spoke briefly, and I didn't have time to review everything because the agenda packet wasn't out when we met, but I had promised that I would speak to you and your committee in regards to the cost to the town. The town currently incurs a cost of $22,000 a year out of the general fund for insurance and maintenance for all the art pieces. So I am very glad that you have taken it upon yourself and into the committee to consider maintenance and that coming out of the fund, because a $22,000 expenditure, I believe, is a lot of money. And I believe that I don't want to speak for the other council members, but we're concerned about that being funded. And thank you for your time, and hope that we can all get together and work with you.
Yeah, I look forward to hearing more about the issues at hand.
Thank you. Councilman Brown?
Thank you, Mayor. Dory, thank you. That was a well-thought-out, well-stated representation of the Art Committee. I appreciate it very much. We've got, the council clearly has a lot of work to do. We will probably be involving you and your committee in some of the discussions and some of the situations. We might even be holding a work study session specifically for this. We've discussed it, and that might happen, might not, but my guess is it probably will. But I can't think of anybody better to take this over than you.
Temporarily.
You. Thank you very much.
Are there any speaker cards?
Just Dory's.
Okay. Well, so we really appreciate it. We know all the work that you're putting into it. As a charter member of the Arts Council in, the 1800s or something, I really appreciate what you're doing. And that I think that some of the questions that we'll have, we'll work together with you and with Rachel and see how we can come up with something that works for everybody. But we really appreciate your time and the fact that you're volunteering. We recognize that very much. Anybody else for any? Yes, sir.
No, I was just going to.
Oh, I thought you were,
No.
okay. You,
I was
do you
going
think
to.
we're going to do that? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I would, I don't feel that we have enough information for the council or for the committee to actually make a motion tonight. I would like to direct staff to possibly put together a work study session for us so we can discuss this openly and have your input. And I would like to see that, if possible, before the July break.
Okay, staff and I and the Public Art Committee will try to work together. What we'll try to do is put together some recommendations and possibly a plan of action on this particular topic.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. The last item, or the next to last item, is the discussion with possible direction relating to legislative items in the League of Cities and Towns bulletins, any of the notes or the call. Grady, you have anything?
I don't. My computer keeps crashing. I keep bringing it up, and I don't have anything that I can pull up right now. I'm very sorry.
Oh, that's okay. Aaron, do you know anything new?
No, nothing. During the call last week, I think they referenced a couple new bills. The one I think that is the most, which Mayor, you can probably speak to yourself, the one that's the most directly applicable to I think to our council is that HB 2672 regarding short-term rentals, vacation rentals. It appears to have traction. It is moving forward. It's been passed out of the House, and I think is on its way to the Senate now. Is that right? Yeah. So.
I was going to ask you about that because it is scheduled to be in Senate Commerce, which is chaired by Senator Michelle Ugenti Rita, and it's going to be heard on Thursday. So this is our bill. We've already expressed support for it, but if you would like to just email her and say we appreciate that it is on the agenda, and that we would really appreciate her support for that, for this Representative Kavanaugh bill dealing with short-term rental. That would be really good. You could do that, or we could have Grady do that. I wrote her myself, but this is, unequivocally something that we want, so if that's okay with you.
Council had previously provided direction on that particular item, so I think you were safe.
Okay, but just to her, because I think as the chair, that's really important. Another thing that she's doing is she's on appropriations. Now, I don't know if you remember that there was a bill that was going to sweep certain millions from HERF again, that was only going to go to towns that were under 7,000 or something. So that would have been, again, switching and getting the money taken right off the top. It has changed into quite a awesome bill, actually, which could mean $150,000 to over $200,000 to the town of Fountain Hills. It's a transportation. What the sponsor did was, instead of sweeping it from HERF, he's keeping HERF, and then he's asking for an appropriation. So not that likely, but again, Senator Ugenti is on appropriations. I don't think they met yet, I hope. So if you want to also say, hey, we like that one, that would be great. And that, again, is House Bill 2047.
Mayor, just for clarification for the council, this is all contained in the notes that the league sent out on Monday. So
Indeed. And then last, just because we were talking about, and Vice Mayor had mentioned, we were talking about getting some action together on intersections, and we met earlier today with the captain, and a related topic is hands-free, no texting. We have that here in town, but this other bill is 1165, past transportation, now it's on rules, so it's really moving, and I would like, I don't know that we took a stand on this one, 1165.
I don't recall.
Yeah, because there were a couple laying around, but if you're in favor of that, we could just do a general note, and that's 1165, which was the Senate bill, hands-free. It was amended on the floor before it went over. It was amended in committee, but it's in the House now, so it's moving, and if you feel like that's something, because again, it allows the officers to enforce it, because it's hands-free. And I think that goes a long way towards some of the traffic issues and things that we're talking about.
What's good about it too, Mayor, is if I'm understanding this correctly, is that those cities and towns that have enacted their own, there would be about a 12-month period of time before this would actually be implemented in those cities, and then theirs would eventually have to go away. But it still recognizes the sovereignty of the cities and towns that may already have theirs in place. I think that this is actually better than ours. I mean, because it basically makes it tougher, it makes it statewide, and obviously in our town we've seen what happens with distracted drivers.
Yeah, exactly. So I think we're okay supporting that one. Does anybody have anything else on this agenda item? Okay, then we'll go to council discussion, direction to town manager, future agenda items, or anything you'd like to get back from any of the speakers that you want staff to follow up on? No? Okay, great. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Thank you very much.